Hello, this is Father Bill Watson with Sacred Story Institute Jesuit Podcast. Good day to you. This is Father Bill Watson, Sacred Story Institute Jesuit Podcast. Today we are interviewing Jesuit Father Gregory D. Vance, S.J., the Society of Jesus. Father Vance is a Jesuit from the western province of the Society of Jesus. We both entered a number of years ago from the former Oregon province of the Society of Jesus. Father Vance has been with the Society for 34 years. He's been a priest for 21 years. Currently, he is chaplain to Bishop Kelly High School in Boise, Idaho. He is also the diocesan exorcist, and we're going to spend two of our sections of our podcast today speaking with him about his work as an exorcist. But he's also got a great educational background. He's got a BA in English and Philosophy from Gonzaga, a Master of Divinity from Weston Jesuit School of Theology, and a Master's in Educational Leadership from the University of Montana. He served as Director of Adult Formation and Teacher of English at Bellarmine High School, our Jesuit high school in Tacoma, Washington. He was President of Seattle Prep School, Matteo Ricci College, Form 1. Father Vance moved on from there to be Superior of the Jesuit Community at St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana, and Associate Pastor, and then Superior of the Jesuit Community and Teacher of English and a member of the Board of Directors of Gonzaga Prep in Spokane, my old alma mater, and then a teacher of English and a member of the Board of Directors for the Catholic Schools of Fairbanks, where he lived pretty much by himself. After his time in Bellarmine, he became the campus minister for retreats at the Caruso Catholic Center at USC in Los Angeles, California. And now, like I said at the beginning, he's chaplain to Bishop Kelly High School, spiritual director for clergy, and a diocesan exorcist. In this first section, we're going to go over his educational background. He's got a great interest in English. One of his special lifelong interests, he said, is an obsession with the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, which has in turn led him to explore the intersection between mythology and spirituality. He's also very interested in the portrayal of spirituality and the Catholic Church in popular culture, and made this the theme of a series of talks he gave at the Spokane, Washington Novena of Grace. So I'd like to welcome Father Greg Vance of the Society of Jesus. Greg, I'm very happy that you're able to join us this morning from Boise, Idaho.
Great. It's great to be with you, Father Bill.
It's been a while since we've seen each other physically in presence of each other, but we both entered the former Oregon province of the Society of Jesus. Now we are part of Jesuits West.
That's right.
So I wanted to start with your vocational focus and your ministerial focus in the first part of your priesthood. And a lot of it was focused on high school ministry and pastoral ministry.
Right.
What event or maybe starting with your kind of vocation, what event or spiritual or religious experiences were most formative for you in your decision, first of all, to apply for religious life in the Society of Jesus?
Great question. And all of us have a vocation story, and I think mine goes back just to my adolescence. I grew up in Missoula, Montana.
Great.
I came to know the Jesuits not through schools, which is kind of a normal pattern, but through a parish, actually, St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula. And I can just remember as an adolescent, and kind of a troubled adolescent at that, and mixed up about what life was all about, seeing a couple of things. I saw some recently ordained Jesuit priests who came through the parish, and they were very appealing. They were very friendly. They always seemed to have time for youth in their lives. And I saw some older Jesuits too, and some Jesuits kind of on the verge of their own retirement, and they were kind. And the first time I ever went to face-to-face confession was with a Jesuit there in Missoula.
Nice.
And those are just formative experiences that kind of led me to want to be like them. I don't remember in my boyhood, ever feeling like I wanted to be a priest, but I do remember the question occurring to me since my earliest days: how does someone get to do that? How does someone get to stand behind the altar and say Mass? I mean, what is that all about? So I can remember a curiosity about that from my earliest days. And then I think the other thing that I would say in answer to that question is just that, the reputation of the Jesuits also attracted me. And I think the reputation of intellectual life, the reputation of kind of elitism. I mean, that moderates once you join the society and you see that we're just regular folks like anybody else. But at least at that point in my life, that was a part of what I desired. And I was deferred the first time that I applied to the Jesuits, not rejected, but deferred. And I was a freshman in college at the University of Montana, and the suggestion was that maybe I come to Gonzaga and that the society could get to know me a little bit better before I entered. But I also heard behind that, grow up a little bit. And so I bought a motorcycle and I traveled the country, mostly staying in the Southwest for the next year. It took a kind of a gap year, they would call it today. And by the end of that, I was ready to enter the Jesuits and was accepted immediately after that. So
nice. That year was?
That year would have been 1985, and I entered in August of 86.
Nice. Was there any personal spiritual revelation that happened to you apart from just your kind of casual encounter with Jesuits and a desire to kind of follow that lifestyle, vocational style?
Yeah, it's interesting, all those years later, I mean, you look back on your experiences and you can identify spiritual movements. I don't think I could have identified it at the time. I was looking for meaning. I really, really was looking for meaning in my life and significance, and to do something that needed doing and to do something that was important. And those are just experiences that I still have in my own spiritual life that I think God was really working with me. So, with the Jesuit spirituality language, we would call those desires, great desires, and the desire to do something great. I definitely had that.
Nice. I entered after high school, Gonzaga Prep, not Gonzaga University, and my experience was a desire to be a missionary in Africa. I was watching television and I saw kids on a Peace Corps commercial, and I said, that's what I want to do, and I stayed up all night and realized that I didn't want to do that for 2 years or 1 year, but for my whole life. And I thought, I'll be a missionary. When you entered the Jesuits, did you focus on priesthood, or was it more of a pastoral focus? Because I had no focus at all on priesthood until actually I had to apply for theology. That's when suddenly priesthood came in. And the desire for me for priesthood was when I was working in pastoral ministry at one of our high schools, running retreats. And I thought, gee, I really feel I want to be able to hear these people's confessions and give them hope.
Yeah.
So the sacrament for me was reconciliation, not so much liturgy.
Well, Father Bill, as you know, the tradition of the Jesuits is to enter kind of indifferent as to whether or not you become a priest or a brother. Right. And, that was taught to us when we first entered the novitiate too. And so I have a similar experience to you. Priesthood wasn't the issue for me. Being a Jesuit was the issue for me. And I think community life, and, my two novitiate classmates who are still with us are Father Tom Lamana, the rector at Gonzaga University, and
nice.
Father Dave Anderson there with you at Seattle University.
Okay.
And then the Jesuit who's a year ahead of us, who's all by himself now in his class, whom we've adopted, is Father J.K. Adams.
Nice.
So those are some of my dearest friends. They've known me since the day I walked through the door. And so that brotherhood and the principle of community, almost different from the reality of community, was one of the things that we focused on from the very first day. And like you, I think priesthood became an issue and a desire for me after having done some pastoral work. And so I agree with you. I did Regency at Seattle Prep and definitely wanted, after Regency, to move more deeply into a sacramental relationship with people, especially with young people.
So my next question was going to be, how were you drawn to high school work? Because you have a pretty extensive resume in a number of different high schools with both teaching and leadership positions.
Yeah, high school is one of those things in my experience that I did not want at first. I remember in the novitiate, I was sent to Gonzaga Prep for my long experiment, and that was an awful 5-6 months. It was just terrible. Right. Terrible. I was used as kind of a permanent substitute. I never really got to know students. And so by the end of that, I was really scared of high school. I didn't want to go back to high school. And I was working to make my Regency at the retreat house in Portland. And then Father Bill Zelke went and left the society and kind of left me stranded. And so I was sent to Seattle Prep for Regency.
I knew him well.
Yeah, exactly. And I really had to trust. That was one of the most profound experiences of the vow of obedience for me, and the trust that even though I didn't want to do something, that there was something I was being called to do. And a real important figure at that point in my life was Father Tom Healy, who was the president at Seattle Prep, and who kept calling me when I was at Gonzaga, finishing philosophy and getting ready for Regency, kept calling me and saying that he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And that was a basis for a really wonderful friendship. Father Tom Healy and I were very, very close until he died, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can remember from the very first day I walked into the class in Regency, it was different from the novitiate. There had been a few years that had passed. I was a little bit more mature, a little bit more confident in my life, both as a teacher, but I think more specifically as a Jesuit, as a religious in the world. And that it was a great experience. It was a great 3 years, and kind of cemented that would be a career path for my own ministry in the society. So it was a real turnaround. And I feel like now I'm reintegrating that desire to do spirituality ministry, both through exorcism, but also through spiritual direction, into the rest of my life. And so
nice.
That's come full circle for me. So
nice. I was when I came time for me to be missioned after philosophy to my first apostolate, and I wanted to go to the missions in Zambia, because that's why I entered. And I was told that I was too young. It's kind of like, we don't think you're ready, go out. And I didn't ride a motorcycle, but they did send me to a high school. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to go to the high school. And I was a head of campus ministry at our high school in Portland, Oregon, and also a full-time theology professor. But, this is how obedience works. That experience became the focal point of the future ministry that I am now doing. And that would have never happened if I had resisted or left or said, I'm not going to do what you want me to do. So it's amazing how God works through the vow of obedience.
Oh, I agree completely. Those are beautiful experiences that change life and really confirm this life for us. It's great.
Yeah, I taught at an all-boys school, so there was that joke for Jesuits, scholastics going to high schools. One of the teaching advices, first of all, was never smile till Christmas, and I didn't take that advice, and I regret that.
You know what? I heard that advice too, and I think I learned after about a week in the classroom in Regency that the only way I was going to survive and thrive as a teacher was to be myself.
Nice.
And myself is a joyful person, and nice. So I didn't take that advice either, but I think it turned out great. Excellent. And I did take that advice when I was a novice. I think I was trying to be somebody I wasn't, and that's an essential difference between the two experiences.
Good point. Very good point. So you've had a lot of experience in high school ministry. You've seen young adults over the last 20 or so years at the high school level. What do you see as the biggest challenges to their living the Catholic faith as young adults, and the experiences that make it difficult for them to stay in the church or to continue to be believers? Because, when I work in parishes in the Seattle area, I go out there and you just don't see young people. They're kind of gone.
Right. Yeah, it's sad. And with the current pandemic and the way we're kind of locked down with weekend masses, the hope is that people will come back once the pandemic kind of passes and stuff. I know my mom, who's 82, she's part of that generation who can't wait to go back to church. But I wonder about the 30s and the 20s and the, somethings, and if they feel like, well, look, I haven't been to church in 7 months and I'm okay, so maybe I don't need it. That's a real profound question for us as a church.
Yeah, I spoke to one of the Jesuits from the Northwest region recently, and he said the pandemic has exposed the soft underbelly of faith. And he's in an area where there's predominantly Hispanic, but also a lot of Anglos. He says the Hispanics are a little more devout than the Anglos, but not much. And he says, I am wondering if the majority will just stay away, even when it's safe to come back.
Yeah. I think that's a profound question. And I don't know that there's any way to answer it until we reach that point in our history.
Yeah, but it also presents a great challenge to us as Jesuits, too, because we know that Jesus Christ is the most interesting thing in the entire cosmos.
Absolutely, yeah. So, to answer your question, I think that young people today, they're products of their culture. And so I'll talk about this later when we talk a little bit about exorcism, too. But I think they're products of naturalism, which is the belief that there is no supernatural realm.
Right.
and that everything can be explained by natural, reason, and also kind of scientific reductionism. That's been our legacy in the West since the Enlightenment, and I think those chickens are home to roost now. In
Yep.
some ways.
Yep. They've laid eggs and they have taken over.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, one of the things I like about what Bishop Barron says is beauty, and I think one of the reasons that I felt so at home in an English classroom, much more so than in a theology classroom, is because I teach literature, especially with a theological bent.
Nice.
So that's one thing that we're products of our culture. I think the other thing too, and this has to do with what we do with kids in high school and during that time in their lives, we give them, at least in my experience, we give them sometimes a really healthy sense of what the church can be in terms of supportive community, in terms of supporting prayer and the growth in the spiritual life. But we don't give them a very good sense of what the church actually is out there in the parish life. And so there's such a disconnect when they leave a high school and go to college and all those other things that tempt somebody in college. And then on top of it, having to live your faith and trying to find a community of faith that just doesn't exist the same way it did in high school. And so, those religious high schools, the Jesuit and the Catholic high schools, are kind of rarefied environments. And I haven't figured that out exactly how to give them a sense of how hard it is. But generations of my students, have kept in touch with me and saying it's so much harder to live your faith outside of that, that really supportive and close and intimate environment that we had in the high school.
If you could wave a wand and change one thing in high school ministry, whether it was at a Jesuit school or a diocesan high school, what would be the one thing you would want to change in order to make the faith more dynamic? Would it be an administration change? Would it be a faculty change? Would it be some type of programmatic change? If you could just do one thing, what would it be?
I would want to reconcile the very good emphasis on social justice that we have in our high school with a renewed sense of transcendence, a renewed sense of the cultic, a renewed sense of sacramentality, a renewed sense of the mystery of the church. I think those things need to be reconciled. And my experience has been the pendulum has swung way overboard to the social justice, which is good and a constitutive element of the church. But of necessity, it's swung away from those other things, especially the transcendent.
I totally agree. I entered the Jesuits at a time when the formula after our 32nd General Congregation, where the justice mission became a key issue, but the phrase was the service of faith, of which the promotion of justice is a constituent element. So it was like trying to gain back into the practice of the faith the focus on those who were most in need. And that was a very good balance. But as time went on, it became the service of faith, of which the promotion of justice is a constituent element. And then it became the service of faith and justice. And then it became faith and justice. And then it became justice. Now it's just service.
Exactly. And this is one of my kind of overarching philosophies of the church these days, is that we are not just a political organization. We are a transcendent organization.
Right.
And we have to reflect the nature of God, not just the nature of humanity. So.
Yes, exactly. And we're preparing people for an eternal life, and
absolutely,
this is a transitory experience and kind of our opportunity to get it right here for an eternal glory that's coming.
Exactly.
So you've worked in both Jesuit and diocesan high schools. You're currently at a diocesan high school in Boise, Idaho. What drew you to work in a diocesan high school over a Jesuit one at this point in your life?
That's a good question. I mean, there's an easy answer and then a difficult answer, I think, to that question. The easy answer is the bishop of the diocese here. So he wrote our current provincial, Father Scott Santa Rosa. And there have been Jesuits here for a number of years serving in campus ministry at Boise State. And Father Jack Vance and Father Radmar Howe and now Father Montron, and we have a regent here, Kyle Baker. But that's been the only Jesuit minister in Boise. And the Bishop Peter Christensen, who has had experience of having a Jesuit as a spiritual director at some point in his life, wrote our provincial and said he'd like to have that offered to more of the diocesan clergy. And I was in Los Angeles at the time, serving in campus ministry at USC. And I was not exactly happy. Los Angeles is not the city for this Montana boy.
Right.
And
I like to say of Los Angeles, for all that sunshine, there's an awful lot of shadows.
There's an awful lot of shadow. Exactly right. And I mean that as an exorcist as well. But Father Scott and I were talking, and he said, look, would you like to do something different in Boise, something other than campus ministry? And I said, yes, I would. And they've been kind of aching for a priest to be a chaplain at their school, a true chaplain. Nice. And one of the things, I'm in my heading toward my late 50s. And at this point in my life, I just don't feel like I have the energy to teach 7 classes a day. But the chaplaincy work brings together the very best of what I experienced as a superior at Gonzaga Prep, which was, I can walk into anybody's meeting and be welcome in those conversations. And so that's one of the things. And I think the harder answer to the question is, what are we doing, or how are we processing those places, those institutions where we've been serving for a long time? And I think one of the things we have to ask in our ongoing discernment is, what's the status of our mission at a place where we've been for a long time? One of my experiences is that folks who work at places where Jesuits have been assigned for a long time kind of take for granted that there will always be a Jesuit there. And I'm not sure that that's a promise we can make anymore for a lot of different reasons.
That's right.
And, at the diocesan school, I've been welcomed with open arms, in some ways more deeply and more sincerely than I've been welcomed at Jesuit schools. And I don't mean to put anybody else down or any other institution down, because I think it's just the nature of what happens when you presume that commitment in a lot of different ways. And so those are a couple of the answers that have brought me to the diocese.
Good. Before moving on to our second and third part, where we get explicitly into your work as an exorcist, I'd like to ask just one more question in terms of all of the time that you have committed to high school ministry. If you could identify kind of the most grace-filled event or experience that you've had working with high school ministry, what would it be?
Yeah, that's, there are a number of graces. One of the things I was just talking about, we had a faculty staff retreat day on Friday, and I was talking with a number of faculty and staff about, there are, in my experience, the same kinds of people who are drawn to this work in high school, whether it's teaching and ministering, campus ministry, athletic stuff, or whatever it is. They're the same types of people. And so I work with some folks here at Bishop Kelly in Boise. They could also have worked at Bellarmine in Tacoma with me, or they could have worked at the Jesuit High School in Sydney, Australia, when I was there for tertianship. And especially with the kids, once a door closes in a classroom, and I'm with a bunch of young people, they're absolutely the same. They were the same in the early 90s when I got to Seattle Prep for Regency as they are now. They ask the same questions, and even though they deny this, they are so searching for meaning and significance and purpose in their lives.
Good.
And that is more than anything, more than they want an A, more than they want to win the football game on Friday night. They want purpose and meaning and significance in their life. And I think I'm old enough, and I've been around the block enough times now, that I see that when I look in their eyes. And that's what I'm ultimately about. It doesn't matter what my curriculum is in some ways, because ultimately I want them to adopt the stance in the world that they have to make choices that support the meaning, the significance, and the value of their life.
And that's maybe the great consolation, is because we're made in the image and likeness of God, we are looking for that fullness of love, and we do have it to offer if we can just kind of present it in a way that people can hear it. So
yes,
that's great.
Exactly.
So.
And I think the companion insight is, a lot of people, especially young people, ask, what does God want me to do? And that's a very Jesuit question. What am I going to do for Christ? But the insight is that what I most deeply desire, and the emphasis is on most because it's hard to get to your deepest desire, but what I most deeply desire, I believe in principle, is the same thing that God desires for me, because that's the way I've been created.
Exactly. Thank you, Father Greg Vance. We're going to take a quick break here for Sacred Story Institute Jesuit podcast. We're going to come back for parts 2 and 3 and talk about Father Greg Vance's specific vocation now as an exorcist. Welcome back to Sacred Story Institute Jesuit podcast. We've been interviewing Father Gregory D. Vance of the Society of Jesus, Father Vance is the only Jesuit I know who is a trained exorcist. And in part two, I asked him about his vocation as an exorcist, what drew him to it, how he got permission, what options he had for training, what his training consisted of, where did it take place, what is the process of certification for someone who needs to work in the church as an exorcist, where he is using his training as an exorcist, and he is one of 3 trained exorcists in the Diocese of Boise appointed by the bishop, and I wanted to know if he worked as a team or if they do one-on-one. So here is part 2 of my interview with Father Gregory D. Vance. Welcome back. We're with Father Greg Vance of the Society of Jesus, who is working in the Diocese of Boise, Idaho, at the high school there, the Catholic high school for the diocese, but he's also an exorcist. Father Greg, you are the only Jesuit exorcist I know. Are there others, and what drew you to this apostolate? What was there an experience that happened that you said, I need to do this, I want to do this for the church?
Father Bill, thanks for that. And so I have 3 jobs in my ministry here. So I'm chaplain to the diocesan high school here at Bishop Kelly. I also offer spiritual direction to the clergy of the diocese, and I'm a working exorcist, as you said. That there are other Jesuit exorcists even in this country, but not too many. One of the things that is so kind of touching about this community is that the tradition of Ignatius and spiritual discernment of spirits is revered among the exorcists.
Wow.
But a lot of exorcists who are working feel like the Jesuits have kind of given up the baby with the bathwater in terms of their own spiritual tradition. And I don't have a judgment on that myself, but that's the reputation. But there are a few of us Jesuit exorcists. And how I came to the apostolate is everybody has a story. I think I came through literature. One of my intellectual interests and also ministerial interests as I teach is the portrayal of the church and the portrayal of spirituality, especially in popular culture, media and movies and art and literature and all that stuff. And so I'm very, very interested in that. And so, when I started teaching, Dante, that's certainly something that becomes very clear. Or when kids ask about, this or that contemporary movie, that might have, exorcism or exorcists in it. There's a series on Netflix now called Warrior Nun. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I did. I sent it to some friends of mine in Portland, Oregon.
And I thought it was entertaining, but I thought it was also silly, in some ways. It was silly. So anyway, I kind of came around that way. Then I attended a summer conference while I was in Spokane at Mundelein, Pope Leo XIII Institute. And they had a summer conference for both lay folks and clergy on spiritual warfare and exorcism. And from that, I found out that there was a 2-year training program at the same institute. Oh. And when I came back to Spokane after that summer conference, the then bishop, he called me and he had heard I'd gone to the conference, and he said, I don't have anybody either, but I've got some questions, and some of my priests have questions, and are you willing to put together a dossier on some folks who claim they're possessed? And I didn't know what to, and I said, I'll help in whatever way I can, but I really don't know what I'm doing. So I kind of just cast about in the darkness for a little bit, and then decided that if this was going to move into something more long term, that I definitely needed to be trained.
And you had to seek permission for that from the bishop?
I did.
From the provincial as well?
Yeah, from the provincial as well, but mostly because there's a monetary price. Also, just because of the unique nature of the training and the unique nature of the ministry, certainly. But Father Scott Santa Rosa, he was great. I think that his first kind of glance at my request to be trained as an exorcist was he didn't think it was a good idea, but he stayed faithful to his own prayer and his own discernment. And this was 3-4 years ago now. And he came back, and during one of our manifestations, he said, no, I think this might be a good thing. So go ahead and do it. So I trained at the Pope Leo XIII Institute at Mundelein Seminary, north of Chicago, for 2 years. And we had 2 10-day sessions each year.
On site at Mundelein?
On site, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have other options, Father Greg, for training?
Yeah, there are. So since I started, there have become...
For those out there who may be interested in seeking training.
Yeah, exactly. So this, the Mundelein course is only for clergy, but there were 40 some odd of us in our cohort, and they're from all over the world. We have Franciscans of the Renewal from Northern Ireland. We had a priest from Australia come over twice a year. And it's a great group of folks, mostly diocesan, but some Franciscans, and there was a Benedictine who is an exorcist as well. But there are other options too. One is the Regina Apostolorum in Rome. I would have loved to have gone to Rome, but that's an option for me. With
a little more expensive, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And now there is a group in Denver called Liber Christo, run by Father Chad Ripperger, and he was a lecturer in our program early on, but then he kind of split off to work in Denver with Liber Christo, and that's for both clergy and for lay folks who comprise the prayer teams.
Very good. Getting back to literature and culture, I always to give people a sense of hope. Even though popular culture can be so anti-Christian and anti-Catholic, I said my hope is that if you have a devil movie, I said they always go to the Catholic Church.
Exactly.
And that says something. That says
Father
something
Tom Healy
about
and I, a number of years ago, when we were both in Missoula, there was a show on A&E called Paranormal State, and it was about a group of paranormal investigators out of Penn State. And they were so happy that they had such a diverse group. They had a Wiccan and they had pagans and stuff. But what was so interesting is whenever they felt like they were really in danger, they called a Catholic. Their stated philosophy and their operational philosophy were very, very different.
Yeah, I spent 12 years at Georgetown, where the film The Exorcist was filmed. The first one, right. I think the third one as well. But what a lot of people don't know is that it was a young boy, actually, who was the person who was possessed.
Correct.
And they had gone, I believe, to a Lutheran or Episcopal pastor initially, and they realized that they were dealing with something that they didn't know, and they had to give it over to the Catholic Church.
Exactly. He was a young boy in St. Louis. Yeah.
You are one of 3 trained exorcists appointed by the Bishop of Boise. Do you work as a team or individually or both?
We work both individually and as a team. So one of the 3 of us ministers specifically to the Spanish-speaking community. He's a priest from Mexico. And then the other 2 of us are Anglos. The other one lives elsewhere in Idaho, but he comes to Boise. Boise's the biggest city in Idaho and also the state capital. And so just because of sheer numbers, I think we probably get the most amount of requests. But we both work on our own. I've worked on my own before, but we will assist each other when we're doing the formal rite. So there's a distinction to be made between a minor exorcism and a major exorcism. There are lots of prayers of minor exorcism, actually even to be found in the liturgy. I mean, there's an exorcism in the baptismal liturgy
exactly
right, and there are minor exorcistic prayers in the Mass and all over the liturgical life of the Church. But the formal rite is the one that was just revised in 98 or 99. That rite, you have to have a bishop's permission in order to enact that rite. It's one of the only sacramentals of the Church that's reserved to the ordained.
Okay, yeah, and I like to point out to lay Catholics that the process or the formula for the renewal of your baptismal vows at Easter time, you're doing 2 things. You are renouncing evil, and you're renouncing the glamour of evil, and you're renouncing all of evil's works. That you do that first. And the second thing you do is you affirm you believe in God the Father and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit and the Church. So that is itself very powerful, saying there's 2 realities at work here and 2 battles that are going on between 2 different sources. So we got to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. And the training among many things I learned, but one of the things I learned is just how prevalent the language of spiritual warfare and the language of exorcism is in the liturgical life of our Church.
Exactly. I've always enjoyed devil movies. Some people like, thrillers. My 2 favorite ones in terms of getting back to culture here in film that present how evil works. I like the one with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves.
The Devil's Advocate.
The Devil's Advocate, in terms of how evil manifests in terms of like a corporate environment. Powerful film. And the other one I saw about 4 or 5 summers ago called The Conjuring. Did you see The Conjuring?
I did. Okay. Yeah, and that's based on, isn't that based on the experiences of Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Exactly. And I never heard of them. The movie, it was the only movie that ever scared me.
Wow.
I have never been scared by The Exorcist or any of these other movies. This is the only one that got under my skin.
I
So
agree. I love the devil's advocate. One of the things I loved about it is that the end just starts the process all over again. There's just
exactly.
a little kind of prick of the ego that will start down the
That's right.
primrose path to to full possession.
That's right.
The other one that I sometimes recommend to people, although you have to be careful, is it's a movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
I've seen that. Yes.
And it is partially based on a true story of a French case, Annelise Michel, and the trial of two priests for negligent homicide in her death during an exorcism. One of the things that's fascinating to me is not so much the exorcism scenes, but the courtroom scenes, and trying to think about how would you argue in a courtroom setting, in a legal setting, for the reality of the non-physical realm.
We're talking with Father Greg Vance of the Society of Jesus about his work as an exorcist in the Diocese of Boise. We're going to come back for our third part of our interview and get into the specifics of what actually goes on when a priest performs an exorcism rite and the types of situations that call forth the expertise and the ministry of exorcists. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sacred Story Institute Jesuit Podcast. This is Father William Watson of the Society of Jesus, President and founder of Sacred Story Institute. We are in our third part of our interview with Jesuit Gregory D. Vance, a trained exorcist. Last section, we spoke about his training and how he used it. And in this third section, we get into kind of the practical aspects of it, his perspective on evil. Why does the church have exorcists? Didn't we solve all this problem with psychology and neuroscience? What are the varieties of situations that would need someone who is specialized in this specific ministry? I asked him what his perspective, where we are in the world regarding manifestations of the evil and the demonic, and if he's personally experienced the face of evil in his work, and what is his greatest hope in the face of evil and the demonic in our world today. Part 3 of my interview with Father Gregory D. Vance. Welcome back. We're with Father Greg Vance of the Society of Jesus. We have talked about his high school career, many things that he has done, and his interest in becoming an exorcist and kind of what his training consisted of. Now, in this third and last part of our conversation, we're going to look at kind of what does an exorcist do, types of experiences that would call forth the expertise and the pastoral expertise of an exorcist. So, Father Greg Vance, I'll start with this comment. I had sent this to you by email when you were asking questions about kind of, what was I interested in interviewing you? And I said it was my experience, and it kind of came to it over a long period of time. It's that phrase antichrist in the scriptures, especially in John.
Right.
That possession is a continuum from mild addiction to full demonic possession, and that any place in the human spirit or soul that is not occupied and where Christ and the Holy Spirit is home is occupied by its opposite. So I don't know if that made any sense or if you would agree. So, but anyway, I'm going to lead off with that in terms of your understanding of how evil can reside within a being crafted in God's image and likeness, body
Absolutely.
and spirit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it fits with my own kind of philosophy that we are created as mind, body, and spirit. To say we're only mind is the Kantian mistake of the Enlightenment.
And for the non-philosophers, explain what Kantian is.
Yeah, I mean, he said cogito ergo sum, which is I think, therefore I am. And he makes a very close connection with his ability to reason and his existence. And I think that's reductionistic to say that that's all we are. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to Hamlet when he says to his friend Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. You can explain that just by our own human experience, too. So, like I sometimes tell the kids at Mass, it's not like if I cut your little finger off, I haven't cut your love out of your life, right?
Correct.
And so we already believe in the non-physical, and we see it through its effects. We see that with faith as well. And I think we see evil that way too. We see it through its effects. So, I would agree. And I think your philosophy is supported by the scriptures, where Jesus says, if you cast out an evil spirit and you don't fill that space, then the evil spirit, goes and brings 7 of his friends back because
Right.
there's a nice swept place to go live again.
Could be
So
seven other philosophers.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I just think that we are a combination in this life of mind, body, and spirit. And so if you tear your ACL, that's a physical injury and you need to see a doctor for that. But it also has psychological and spiritual implications for you. It's going to make, your belief in a loving God who is interested in your health a little bit more challenging. And it's also going to make you depressed psychologically. And so if we're going to talk about wholeness and healing, to kind of cut the spiritual out is bifurcating the reality of how we've been created.
Yeah, in terms of healing, I oftentimes use this example when I'm giving a retreat or even in confession. I said at the story of the gospel where the crippled is lowered down through the roof in this, and Jesus is there, and he looks around at his audience. He says, which is greater, to tell this man to get up and walk, or to say your sins are forgiven?
Beautiful, yes.
And he says, to show you that I have the power to forgive sin, I say to you, get up and walk.
Absolutely.
So the primacy is the healing of the soul, which basically has banished us from eternal life. And Jesus uses miraculous physical healings to show that he has the power over all of creation.
Absolutely, yes.
So I have to ask this question because we're going to have skeptics out there. Haven't we solved all this devil stuff with psychology and neuroscience?
Great question. One of the most fascinating teachers that I had in my training is a deacon of the church, but he is also a retired clinical psychiatrist. And this is his specific area, is the relationship between emotional or psychological disturbance and true possession. So let me give you a couple answers that I learned from him. One is a scriptural answer. In Mark's gospel, I think chapter 3, Jesus comes back to Nazareth and the crowd gathers. Then his relatives show up and they want to take him away because they say he's out of his mind. And in Mark's gospel, the scribes and Pharisees come from Jerusalem and they say he's possessed by Beelzebul. And so the gospel writer knew the difference, or else he wouldn't have put both of those things in. He would have made a distinction between, somebody being crazy and somebody being possessed by Beelzebul.
Right.
In Matthew's version of that same story, the family is taken out. So it's almost like Matthew's saying it's easier to believe that Jesus would be possessed than that he would be to believe that he was crazy. So that's a scriptural answer. I mean, we have plenty of evidence that even ancient people knew the difference between a mental problem and a spiritual problem. Now, here's the scientific answer. So the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Emotional and Psychological Disturbances, has all sorts of symptoms and criteria in order to make a diagnosis for like paranoid schizophrenia or manic depressive disorder.
Borderline personality
disorder, all that stuff. And none of those symptoms are consistent with the 4 primary signs of possession. And the 4 primary signs of possession are the ability to speak a language that one has never studied before, especially a language associated with Jesus, so Aramaic or Latin or Greek. That's one. The second is preternatural or abnormal strength. And you can explain some of this stuff scientifically too. Adrenaline. I mean, there are stories about people who are able to lift a car off of a loved one because adrenaline is pumping through their system. The third is the knowledge of hidden things. So if somebody knows my sins and says them out loud, very specifically, they shouldn't have knowledge of that. That's a preternatural kind of phenomenon. And then the last one is the aversion to things that are holy. And so you see this in movies when somebody who's possessed like puts their finger in the holy water and it starts to boil, right. Or when the host, the Eucharist is touched to the forehead of somebody,
or cross or crucifix or something like that.
Yeah, and it makes a burn mark on their head or something like that. And that one I think is possible to be faked, but taken all together, there isn't a scientific explanation. And then the third answer I'd give to that is that it's common belief and practice that somebody who's paranoid schizophrenic, their hallucinations are real to them, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't know that they're actually hallucinating. Whereas, and this has been borne out by my own personal experience, somebody who's possessed actually knows that there's a foreign presence within them and has lucid moments where they're able to reflect on the presence that is, threatening them and kind of taking over parts of their personality.
Okay, briefly. So, a summary then of the four signs of authentic possession.
Yeah. Once again, the ability to speak a language that somebody's never studied before, especially associated with Jesus. The abnormal or preternatural strength.
Okay.
The knowledge of hidden things, and the aversion to the sacred.
Very good. On the knowledge of hidden things, and I'm sure you've heard this story, I think it's authentic. Mother Mary Alacoque, who had the visions of the Sacred Heart,
right?
A visitation sister, whose spiritual director was Claude de la Colombière. They're both saints now, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque and St. Claude de la Colombière. But she was considered the dumbest nun in the convent, and she was getting these visitations of Jesus and calling for this devotion to the Sacred Heart. And the prioress brought in Father Claude to determine if she was deluded, crazy, or if she was possessed in some way. And so Father Claude gave her a homework assignment. He said, next time Jesus appears to you, I want you to ask him, what was the last sin I confessed?
Oh, wow.
And so he comes back a number of weeks later and he said to Sister Margaret Mary Alacoque, did the Lord appear to you? And she said, yes. And he said, Sister, did you ask him the question that I asked you to ask him? And she said, yes, Father. And Father Claude says, well, what was his response? She said, Father, Jesus told me to tell you he forgot.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So
that's wonderful.
That's when he knew it was authentic, because the devil would have pegged the sin if she was possessed.
Well, here's one of the beautiful things that it's kind of common practice in this ministry. And one of the renewals of my own spirituality since I've been doing it is I've been more faithful to regular confession.
Exactly.
Because the conventional wisdom is that, the evil spirits can't use against me a sin that's been forgiven and been absolved. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I will tell you one story. I know there's a question coming later, but in Los Angeles once, I was testing somebody. And I have a little vial that says holy water on it. But I had not blessed the water. I just put tap water in it. And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle water on this person to see if they react. Because if they react just because they think they should react, then they're faking. So I sprinkled water on the person during the course of a minor exorcism, and the person looked at me and said, Father, if you bless that, it might be more effective.
Interesting.
So there is no way that person should have known that I had not blessed that water, because I was acting just as though it were blessed. And that's the knowledge of hidden things.
Knowledge of hidden things. Very, very powerful. Very powerful. So since we're kind of on the topic already, what are the types of situations that would call forth your specialization in this specific ministry?
Yeah, so if somebody is appointed to be an exorcist, usually it means that the bishop trusts that person to make a judgment in an individual case, and not to have to come to the bishop every time. Can I do an exorcism or not? And so I've been appointed as a stable ministry.
Kind of like a first responder. Is this?
Yeah. But we use what we call a medical model. And under the medical model, the parish priest actually is the primary care physician. And so the parish priest should have some facility in spiritual warfare and in minor exorcisms. And the exorcist, then the trained exorcist, would be the specialist in that medical model. And so oftentimes when people call the church, they have tried everything themselves. And I know of cases where folks have struggled and had a challenge and pain for years and years and years. And of course, when they call, they just want it to be over with, right? And at least in this country, the medical model doesn't go that way. And so the medical model says, no, we need to do some investigation. You need to do some prayer. You need to regularize your marriage. I mean, all these things work together. That's one of the philosophies of mind, body, and spirit is, if you just want an exorcism and then you want to go back to being a Satanist, then the exorcism is not going to work, right?
Sure.
There has to be a commitment from the person to work on his or her spiritual warfare issues as well. And so here in Boise, that's at least a 3-month process before the person would get to see the exorcist. And usually it's 6 months. And they call it a prescription of prayer. And they work with our team that's mostly comprised of lay folks and then some medical professionals, a psychiatrist who would evaluate everybody too. So we try to make sure that the other things that can help are being utilized to help the person too.
One of those prescriptions, Father Greg, would be a regular confession during that kind of prescriptive phase?
Absolutely. And not only that, but a general confession.
Okay.
Yeah, a general confession, and not with the exorcist, but with some other priest,
Okay.
and preparing for a general confession to identify, those areas of darkness and temptation that may have opened a doorway that have led to the present experience.
Okay, since we're in this pandemic, this is a very important kind of a side issue that I hadn't thought of until our discussion happened. What do people do in this extended period of time where they cannot receive sacramental reconciliation? How do they get sin forgiven if they can't get to a priest? Is there a sincere from the heart confession to God that can take care of things, or what do people do?
I mean, I don't think that there is a substitute for sacramental reconciliation. However, I think, better than nothing is what we traditionally call a spiritual communion, right? Okay. And so one of the things I routinely counsel people to do, especially if they can't come physically to Mass, is to read the readings for Mass and to connect. Those are the readings that have been chosen by the Church. And one of the most powerful things, it's so Catholic, as in universal, that every Catholic in the world is asked to reflect on that set of readings for this day, or on that saint's feast day, or whatever it is. And so just to do that unites you with other good and holy people. And then if you make what's called a spiritual communion, and you can look on the internet for that prayer of spiritual communion, and if you can say it with your heart, that is much better than nothing. And of course, the Church teaches that if you can't go to confession, your resolution should be to go as soon as you can go.
Very good. Very good. Yes, exactly. I don't know if you're able to speak about specific cases, but maybe you can speak in general, either from things that you have worked on or people that you know have worked on. One or two situations that really were evidence of possession that required kind of the full exorcism, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I know that's what a lot of your listeners will want to hear about. I hesitate to be too sensationalistic about stuff, but I also do want to say in complete honesty that I've witnessed things that I have no rational category to put them. I just a couple of specifics. I once saw a person whose whites of their eyes went scarlet, and it looked to me like they had broken every blood vessel in their eyes.
Okay.
Both of their eyes. If you pop a blood vessel in your eye, that it takes, days to go away. But
Sure.
within 5 minutes, this person's eyes were clear again.
Okay, that's something.
Yeah, that is, absolutely. And like I said, there are no rational category for me to put that. I don't know how to understand that. But what I believe theologically about it is that the evil spirit who was tormenting that person was also trying to derail me from what I was there to do. Exactly. And I think those things are I hate to use the word, but parlor tricks of the evil spirit in order to derail the truth from entering, and the truth with capital T, the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus Christ, from entering that person's life in a deeper way and casting out the evil spirit that's there.
Yes. During all of this crazy protests that were going on over the summertime, I did a short little video called Cancel Culture and the Demonic, because I saw a lot of this kind of mayhem on the streets, where people had kind of surrendered themselves to what I call the Lord of Chaos.
Yes.
Instead of the Prince of Peace. And I used a little section from the Exorcist film. It's toward the last part of the movie. But the wise, seasoned exorcist is talking to the Jesuit psychiatrist. And the Jesuit psychiatrist says, why this girl? Why is this happening? And he says, I think to make us feel that we are ugly and unlovable. And I think that is the way that evil works probably most commonly. People just get depressed. They don't think there's anything of value in their lives. And that's the main.
That's a whole other kind of wing of reflection. There's a book that hasn't been translated into English yet, and my Italian's not that good, but it's a story of folks who have been possessed and who have experienced liberation talking about what they've learned through the experience, which is valuable. I can't wait to get the English copy of this.
Excellent.
And most of what they say is that they are much more committed to the reality of their spiritual life and much more committed to growing their relationship with Jesus Christ. That's to be remembered as well, is that possession wouldn't happen unless God allowed it. God allows all these things, and so there's a purpose. We're back to the book of Job and stuff like that too. So
it's a choice. Ignatius knew that you can give yourself over to the light or over to the darkness.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
It's a 24/7 conscious choice, because the Holy Spirit's working all the time, but the enemy of human nature is ambitiously eager and does not give up. That goes back to
on Holy Thursday, when I was down at USC, we had a Eucharistic procession outside the church and through part of the campus of USC. And it was beautiful, but it was also disconcerting because we had people growling and barking like dogs at us and hurling curses at us as we were walking with the Eucharist through part of USC's campus. So there are things other than grace at work in the world. There's no question in my mind about this.
I remember, as you mentioned that, I remember video of Benedict in Germany in the early part of his papacy with people on the streets that were dressed in the most kind of outlandishly evil way and doing things like that, hissing and barking and doing totally obscene gestures and things like that.
Yep, exactly. I mean, I see the demonic in that. I definitely see the demonic. And yes, I see anger and I see psychological problem too, but I also see the demonic. And once again, because how can you just excise the spiritual part of that and not use it as part of the explanation for what you're witnessing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. In the world right now, there's a lot of people who are thinking kind of like, there's a lot of really strange things happening, and are we kind of at some inflection point in history? What is your perspective on where the world is regarding manifestations of evil, demonic, and how they most commonly reveal themselves today? Is there something more going on than there's been in the past, or how would you understand it?
Yeah, I mean, I would be reluctant to make a judgment on more or less or anything like that. I have a book that was fascinating to me called Hungry Souls. And the thesis of the book is that some of the paranormal experiences that we might be having is a result of the lack of the traditional prayer for those who are in purgatory. That God may allow them to break that veil between life and death, to reach out to us, to remind us that we have both an obligation and an opportunity to continue to have relationship even with those who passed on. So there are differences in the philosophy between, disembodied spirits and poltergeists and ghosts and possession and demons, and all those things are kind of separate categories. But I think that some of the most horrible things that people can do to one another, as well as some of the most beautiful things that people can do to one another, are both done in the name of God in our history. Exactly. And so, my hope is that I'm going to contribute to what I'm going to contribute what I can to the betterment of the world. I've been reading, especially since last Sunday, we celebrated the 480th anniversary of the founding of the Jesuits. And one of the most stirring pieces of Jesuit documentation is the very beginning of that Formula of the Institute from 1540. And it starts, whosoever wishes to serve as a soldier of Christ under the banner of the cross. And that has always encapsulated what I most deeply want to be. A soldier is somebody who gets shot at.
That's
right. A soldier is somebody who's in the thick of the fight, of the battle. And if you're under the banner, you're going to get the most of it, because the enemy wants to take the banner down so people don't know where to gather.
That's right.
The army doesn't know where to gather. And that has always encapsulated my deepest desire. And so I'm okay if I get shot at every once in a while. I mean, and I've gotten winged a few times, but at the same time, it's not going to stop me from my deepest belief, which is that Jesus Christ has already won the victory through the Paschal mystery.
The enemy one of his greatest tactics is to try to instill fear in us so that we back away from the good that we're doing.
Exactly. And I also had the same person who told me about that I should bless the holy water also said to me that Jesus loves the fact that I'm a very joyful priest.
Nice.
And I love that. I've prayed with that many, many times. And Pope Francis talks about joy. C.S. Lewis had a great treatise on joy. And so I believe that. And for whatever reason, one of the blessings and graces that God has given me in this ministry is not to be too afraid. And I keep wondering when is going to be my turn to be afraid. But, I've awakened in the middle of the night, and if I feel kind of oppressed, I'll say the St. Michael prayer or the Memorare, sure. And and it seems to help me and to calm my spirit. So that's all good news to me.
Going back to your comment on the different types of things in terms of the poltergeist, I would recommend to people you mentioned Ed and Lorraine Warren with regards to the story that was put to film, The Conjuring. Yes. There's a book out on their ministry. It's called The Demonologist, and they make the distinction. They were the ones who pioneered the paranormal investigation with photography, heat and cold sensors. Correct. And they were the first responders for like the Amityville haunting.
Correct.
So diocese would call them in, but they make the distinction between a haunting and something that's demonic.
Yeah.
And they have some very, very good case studies in there that show the people the distinction between the two, which is really worth exploring. Because I know I did have a business friend of mine who early in his career, at a very pivotal point in his career, woke up, had a manifestation of a huge stagecoach with a black hand inviting him to get in, and he smelled rotting flesh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said, get out. Yeah. And he said he was very proud of that. And I said, when did that happen in your life? And he showed me this continuum in terms of his business success. And it was right before his business took off. And he said, the demonic knew you were going to be successful and do good things and tried to derail you at a very, very critical point.
The technical term for the smell is called effluvia.
Okay.
And, there are traditions in the lives of the saints of, smelling of flowers, especially after a saint has passed away. So sure. There is both demonic as well as heavenly effluvia. And so that's the technical term for that. I think another thing that might be helpful is kind of 4 levels of demonic activity that are traditionally talked about in this ministry. One is demonic obsession. When people are obsessed with the occult, or people are obsessed with, in my age, it was, heavy metal music and some of that stuff that was associated in the early 80s and late 70s. But many people go through periods in their lives where they're obsessed with things of the darkness, like Ouija boards and the occult and things like that. The next level is demonic oppression. And the history of the saints are just full of examples of the saints, the holy ones, being oppressed by the evil one, trying to attack them and ruin their faith. And then the next level is infestation, demonic infestation, which has to do with a place rather than people. And a lot of people say that places where there have been violent death, concentration camps in Germany, Auschwitz is a perfect example, or the Gettysburg battlefield here in the United States, are places where the evil spirits kind of hang around because so much tragedy had happened there. And then the last one is full possession. The other thing that I want to make sure that I say is it is the wisdom that you can be in a state of grace and still be possessed. So that's a very interesting distinction to think about too. That possession has to do not with your soul, because if Jesus Christ has won our salvation, then the devil can't touch our soul, right? But possession has to do with your body. So there are stories of those who are still in the state of grace. This Annalise Michel is one of those people who are in the state of grace but still exhibit the primary signs of possession.
And that was the movie, The Haunting of Emily Rose?
The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Halloween is upon us. What are the do's and don'ts for people around Halloween?
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to remember is that the original motivation for Halloween is a Christian one.
Exactly.
You dressed up like a demon or a ghost so that the demons or the ghosts would confuse who they were going after.
Interesting.
And but it's also associated with paganism and harvest time and all those kinds of things. And I just think there's no way to live in this world without being affected by contrary voices. My best advice to folks is, if you're going to dress up and, let your kids go out and, there's a controversy about whether or not that's the right choice during the pandemic and stuff too,
Sure.
but then you should probably be aware of your own faith. The structures of authority are also important in the exorcism ministry too. And so parents definitely have authority over their children and can pray over their children and pray that God protect them. Maybe it's better to dress up like My Little Pony than it is to dress up like a ghost or a goblin. I don't know. I just think care needs to be taken with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And if we find ourselves, going too far down a pathway, we have a conscience for a reason. And God has given us that little voice inside that says, okay, too dark.
Too dark.
And part of the journey of our spiritual growth is learning how to listen and trust that voice.
I remember in one of the interview books with Peter Seewald and Benedict, I think it was before he was Pope, he was still Cardinal and Prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. But he made the point, and this goes back to one of your early comments with regards to ministry to high school students in terms of true social engagement, but also an elevation of the cultic mystery of the faith and the transcendent. Yeah. And he made this important point. He said that the most sophisticated modern cultures, and he said West Germany and the United States, where technology is kind of worshipped, he said those are the two parts of the world where manifestations of the demonic and witchcraft are growing the most quickly. Yeah. And his intuition is that people had totally banished the idea of the transcendent, but were still searching for, if you will, the magic and the power that they knew was a part of themselves intuitively, and are searching for it in the wrong directions.
Yeah, exactly. And, to be completely honest, the church, especially the church in this country, hasn't helped with that. The sexual abuse crisis has given people another rational reason not to trust the church.
Exactly.
Right? And its ministers. And so, but we, those of us who still believe that we have the truth of our salvation in this church, have to work even harder to let people into that, and to beg people to trust that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
If you were the devil, what better way to get people to mistrust the graced vehicle of the Catholic Church than by getting priests to abuse children?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it all makes sense in some twisted way, but it all makes sense in the graced way too.
Exactly.
Because this, that experience of that betrayal can lead one to the traditional images of the church, like the communion of saints and the surrounding of angels and our guardian angels and all those things, the rosary. And I've rediscovered a lot of that stuff through this ministry, a lot of those things that are so helpful for our faith.
The sacramentals, we call them, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, this has been a really rich discussion. I could go on for another 2 hours, I think. I want to thank you.
Too, yeah.
I want to thank you, Father Greg Vance of the Society of Jesus. And since we ended on this hopeful note of the power and the grace of Jesus Christ, would you grace our audience with a prayer of protection and hope for the future?
Of course. I now say after every Mass that I celebrate or attend, the St. Michael prayer, which used to be a tradition in our church, has kind of fallen away, but written by Pope Leo XIII. And so, St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. May Almighty God bless us and keep us, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Father Greg Vance, thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful.
Father Bill, this has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed our conversation very much. Thank you for having me.
This has been Sacred Story Institute Jesuit Podcast with Father Bill Watson. If you liked our program, please subscribe to our podcast channel. And may God bless you